Welcome to another episode of the Weird Rap Discussion Gang. We're discussing Saafir this episode, and we got special guest Demone Carter from the Dad Bod Rap Pod rival gang, the Dad Bods, my arch nemesis. But we're making peace today. We also got Zach Ostrowski, aka Beverly Fresh, and we got Chief and the Doomsday Device. So let's get into it, shall we? We're going to start off with Casual, That Bullshit, featuring Saafir. This is the first track I ever heard of Saafir, which I assume it's like the first for most people, so I thought that was a good way to start it off.
Fuck the bullshit. Now when it thought I was gonna rhyme, right? Hell motherfucking no. Hell no. I'm talking shit. I'm from the motherfucking West. I'm from Oakland. See what I'm saying? And I'm like crazy, like schizophrenic tenant number one. When it comes to housing, arousing the intellect with introspect. Flex on me? I don't think so yet. My jetting is letting my exhaust across my balls. I smell the fear and the sauce in your drawers for arming, hammer, charming, grammar. I got the flow, G, the deep flow, the hobo, the junction. The D stands for diesel. I ran into my extra.
I thought this was a pretty nice intro to Saafir. Definitely caught my ear, really unorthodox style, which I think is worth just talking about to start off with.
Yeah, I mean, I know for myself, I'm not sure what the respective ages are here, but
40s.
I know for myself in being in the Bay Area at that time, it was just like a bomb went off. Everybody memorized that rap. It was such a moment, a great introduction to Saafir and his work. And I do think it kind of sparked that beef because in the minds of many, he upstaged Casual on his own album. For a lot of people, That Bullshit is considered the best track on Fear itself, which is probably an unfair thing. But it definitely, I remember myself and kind of all my rapper friends were just enthralled with Saafir's voice, his tone of voice, and also, word choice and the pocket he was doing. It was just so out of the box. And so it was really cool of Casual to do that, but you see how quickly, that kind of a nice gesture turned into a whole thing.
Man, it also from like day one captures like the gangster element of Saafir. Like people don't always directly attribute that to him, but he does have like more of that Seagram and like those cats side of Oakland in him than he does like the Hyro side to him, even though he's super talented as a lyricist.
Yeah, and I think it also sets us up for this like distinguished flow that he has, this kind of like staggered offbeat on beat, which I think is really coming from the freestyle background. And I like how it kind of reminded me of some of the stuff we talked about with Old Dirty. At the end, he's like, it's basically not a rap. And like he starts the verse by talking shit, he rhymes, and then he talks shit at the end. And they kind of like blend together. So kind of like Old Dirty, there's no kind of structure to the rap. It can go into a song. It could go into him ranting about something. So I like that kind of unhinged attitude that he has here.
Yeah, I think it's interesting that you mentioned his style maybe coming from freestyle, because I think that's a pretty good theory. Because I was trying to think of any other MCs that really sound like that as far as the awkward pauses, the sort of off-kilter flow he has, and I can't really think of anyone personally. Like usually I can kind of draw some comparisons to people that might have influenced someone, but I think that's an interesting thought that, when you're trying to just think of the next word or phrase, you take an extra pause or two, but he does it so drastically and so like on the next beat. It's really interesting.
And we saw when he and we'll get into this with the battle talk, but when he did the battle on Camille radio station, it was kind of seamless, his actual improvised freestyle and the stuff that he wrote. So I definitely think that that's very true. Kind of being in the Bay Area at that time, the kind of cipher freestyle culture was huge, and the idea of you being able to um, really bust off the head was a very high value. I remember we used to look down our noses at the East Coast notion of freestyle, which was like you could just bring a verse and come on the radio and do your verse. So I think that's a really great insight in that. I do feel like Saafir and really the whole Hobo Junction, like their whole off kilter thing, definitely feels like something that grew out of the ciphering and trying to kind of outdo and be weirder than the next man.
Shall we get into Bent? This is off of Boxcar Sessions. Bent.
Through the socket of currents of electricity. They can't get with me. Invisible to the retina half. Way reality, part limbo, a nervous laugh while you're climbing. Through windows, never spin holes on Mary. Go rounds, be the ground level for ghouls. Schools, a fish, victims on a hit list. Me like Geronimo on a rat. To compact, tackling patterns, adding the seasonings, flavor. No false teeth for beef. Catapulting fingers to light switches so you can see the real. I feel the tension. My sight twitches. I'm bent.
And just for context, in case anyone is unaware, this is Saafir's debut album that came out in '94. I believe that's like 1 year after the Casual album.
Yeah, in terms of weird, let's think about the structure first. So it starts out with this like old-timey, like two old-timers exchanging, like they're killing time, doing some sing-songy stuff. He goes into, I'm the West Coast cowboy.
So
And,
weird.
the other guy's about to start and he's like, fuck that, I'll start it then. And there's like this kind of riff in between them. So I think that as one of the many moments on the album where there's this importance of the crew, the Hobo Junction is like as equal as him, and there's this playful, natural exchange between them. He doesn't even start off his own album technically. There's, like we were saying, somebody else in the crew starts it out with a freestyle. So we have this humorous kind of parody to begin the track, and then it goes into a completely dark, demented kind of adventure or some kind of mission that he's on. I think it's kind of like a disjointed narrative, but it's still very vivid in how he describes things. He started, the more I got back into his lyrics, kind of remind me a little bit of Self Jupiter, like how
Mm.
kind of gothic and literary some of the phrasings are. Like he has a line, I had to remold the floor, like that's, and you never heard another rapper say that. Um, and it's also just a bizarre concept, a bizarre visual to think about. And he's like, the foundation for creation, mates bend the pleasure dome into another realm, a walk stalked nightly by the ogre that's rarely sober. And I think, you know, that's, crazy run. But I think this ogre and is kind of like this dark spirit that's like always chasing him. I felt like there's this unnameable menace or adversary that he's kind of battling in a lot of his raps. It doesn't seem like another rapper he's calling out. It's more like a dark force. So I think this track definitely gets into that. And I love some of these lines. I'm beyond dawn. um, don't don't rest, never possess, stagnant magnets. And I think there's a few references to the sleeper, like the person that's unaware.
Mm.
And he's got the light sleeper track at the end of this. There's the trembled sleeper. See if you can find the lost treasure through measures and bars. So he's like always kind of pitting himself against this, force that he's trying to overcome. And I think there's this hammering energy and stamina and like throughout the whole album. Um, and I think, that also ties into his love of cars, a lot of car references,
Yeah.
racing, that ties into, you know, what's going on in the West Coast. So this like momentum, this speed, and not like a fast flippity flappity yiggity yabbity kind of style, but just like a driving stamina. I think that's consistent throughout.
Well, and
Yeah,
look, a uniqueness too, not to step on what you were
yeah,
saying,
yeah,
but also like this drive to be completely unique from every other city that's like doing hip hop and even unique amongst Oakland, you know, because like
Mhm.
Hobo doesn't sound like High Row and High Row doesn't sound like E40 and the Click and them, and like just everybody's like on their own thing out there.
yeah. And I think
Yeah,
when he tries to do that, when he tries to separate himself, it's never in a very didactic, clear way. It's always through these metaphors and like really abstract references, um, which I think is what exactly sets him apart.
the track is wild too. Like going back to listen to Boxcar, which is, you know, something I listened to a bunch when it came out and over the years, but hadn't listened to in a while. I am sort of struck by the production style and the beat choices that were made, that definitely set up Saafir's off kilter flow in a great way, but also, I think to your point, Chief, separate himself and his crew from what other people in Oakland were doing at the time. So kind of there's Hobo, there's Hyro, there's also kind of like Mystic Journeyman, kind of pre-Living Legends had this whole scene called Unsigned and Hella Broke, which was you know, really holding up the do-it-yourself aesthetic and these really kind of, for lack of a better term, janky type of beats. And so I was always struck that Hobo Junction did not try to take the route that Souls of Mischief and Hyro did, which was a little bit more polished, more East Coast direct influence type of style. These type of beats, Saafir doesn't even return to. By the time he does the Mr. No No record, he's completely moved on from this. And I think that's part of what makes Boxcar so special, is this moment in time that he captures and the sound aesthetic of it that I don't know that we've heard, that blend of street rap and abstract avant-garde in one package. And this track is a great example of that. And the very, very weird skit in the beginning. Now I'm remembering this. I'm like, what were they on? It's just so goofy and so funny, but at the same time, just strange. I mean, all through this album, I'm like, fuck, this is weird.
Yeah, the only comparison I can think of in terms of street lyrics and like this kind of avant-garde, different style production would be the first Cypress Hill record. And it's not even like a direct comparison per se, but it's kind of that West Coast sensibility over like this East Coast darkness, like production. But like this production, I know Beverly, when he was talking about Hammer, and he was talking more about like just the volume of the lyrics and the intensity, but they do the same thing with the drums on like every track. There's like these definitive hammer and drums, and then a lot of old school like psychedelic tricks on the rest of it, like a lot of phase in and just really lo-fi interesting production that makes his voice really pop.
Yeah, I was going to remark on the production too. Like this one, the beat does kind of knock a bit, but we'll hear on like this next track, Light Sleeper, how just muddy the kick is, just so like barely even there, and the bass line is just fighting with the kick, and it's just this mess on the low end. And the whole throughout the album, there's a lot of real like lo-fi shit, which it wasn't that weird for the Bay, I guess, in the underground, but this was a majorly distributed album in 1994, following like, you know, The Chronic had come out and everyone's on the G-Funk thing trying to copy Dr. Dre's production, and this is like so opposite of that. So yeah, it's really special in that way, I think. And then go ahead.
No, keep going. Sorry.
Oh, it was just when you were remarking on his vocabulary and the strange wording, like, what do you say, remolding the floor. Another one I caught I don't remember if it's on the album or just the demos, but he says phalanges, and I was like, have I ever heard any other rapper say phalanges? And I had to go. I was like on genius.com and I looked up phalanges. No other rapper has ever said phalanges, at least as far as they're concerned. I thought it was interesting. There's a song called Phalanges by an artist named Blackface the Alien, and he doesn't say phalanges in the track, but it's a good rap song. And this guy, Blackface the Alien, he only had 13 followers on Spotify for his one song, Phalanges, but it's a really good track. I suggest you check it out. Become his 15th follower. Yeah.
That's an amazing band name. Not even an MC name, just a band name.
Well, yeah, I believe he's a solo artist. And I think his like image for his Spotify was E.T. with his face like blacked out, and then his finger, his glowing finger, is like poorly like MS painted so that it becomes a burning joint.
Okay.
All right, so here we are with Light Sleeper.
And outspoken, mouth no token, I'm just the roustabout. I have a house in clout, but I don't come tight. But it's routines, it's street fame for true hip hop. It's a trip when I drop my style and forget it, and forget where I got it from and how I got them sprung. Cause I'm stuck on myself and I depend on my luck and wealth for health matters. So I don't explode with stress, I'll serve you an elf platter. They'll tell me that my shit is fatter than the first, but I'm a light sleeping rapper in a hearse. Wake up.
I'm realizing just now this may be like mixed better for headphones than for speakers, because it sounds better right now than it did on my monitor speakers.
No, this was 100% a headphone album right here. Like, it was dope throwing in mixes back in the day, but this was like what I used to have on under my hood when I was supposed to be listening to the teacher in school. Shit like this.
Same. What a weird song to pick for the lead single though. I've never quite understood something like Just Riding, for instance, would have been a much more conventional pick for the first single, but it makes me think that the idea was to showcase Saafir at his most off kilter. I remember having long arguments with my cousin who was like, this dude is whack. Like, this is horrible, because it was just so, the dichotomy in me, it was like, what is he doing? What is this about? And so I've always thought it was really interesting that was the first track that they chose. And also that it's something that like, I think it maybe was a nod to try to get some East Coast heads involved with it. This is a track to me that was like almost Evil D-ish, almost kind of Black Moonish, and it's in the way that it was presented. You know what I'm saying? So the little mini A&R in me is always trying to be like, why did they pick that one? And like, why, but I loved it. It's one of the better hooks on the record. I love the beat, and I feel like it really showcases kind of the deep end of the swimming pool in terms of Saafir's timing and the creation of I say pocket, but I don't know if he really even has a pocket. Like, he's really it's damn near free jazz sometimes with his cadence, and I think Light Sleeper is a great encapsulation of that.
Yeah, his style overall and this single being a lead single were just so polarizing, because either people like got it in terms of how free he was with the rhyme structure, or they were like, this dude is whack, he can't even rhyme on beat, yada yada yada. But just the way that he creates little couplets within his bars and like changes where the rhyme is and whatnot. This was the first song I ever heard from him. There was an Access TV show that used to come on all the time, and it showed the music video. So it also showed like all the graffiti stuff he was into as well. And so yeah, it was cool like to have this be my introduction to Saafir, because it made every other time that he came across my radar unique. You know, it was like peeling layers back from him. Especially like Menace to Society. When he popped up in Menace to Society, I'm like, oh shit, that's that weird rapping dude. That's that guy with bars, you know. So yeah, like this song I'll always treasure as like my intro to Saafir.
So I was really far removed from any sort of hip hop world when this came out. I was living in Malaysia. So I'm just kind of curious if anyone knows, like, I'm gathering that it was kind of divisive amongst the larger hip hop scene about as far as its reception, but I'm curious, how it sold in general and how much, promotion and exposure it got at the time and how it was received in general.
I mean, it was one of those that, I think this is what, Quest Recordings, which is like a subsidiary of Warner Brothers.
Like a subsidiary of a subsidiary.
Exactly. It was a major label release, but kind of not really. Not in the way that Souls of Mischief was on Jive, for instance. And it came at, you made a great point about the Chronic. It came at the late end of the real backpack era. So this is like one of those last weird things that got across. And I don't know, I don't have the stats in front of me, but I don't remember it being terribly popular in the, like, I would be shocked if Stretch and Bob ever played it. Like, it was one of those type of things where, the Wake Up Show, obviously, because we're out here in the West Coast, Sway was fucking with it, but like, Saafir was one of those artists that was definitely polarizing in the sense that, he was so far from the orthodoxy of rap at that time. And so I'd venture to guess, not that I was across the nation at that time, but it even felt at the time that like, this is our Bay Area thing. Like, if you're cool and you're from the Bay Area, you know about this, which we're used to. E40, similar thing. Like, outside of the Bay Area, in some places in the South, nobody liked E40, and we all knew and understood that. So I don't think it was widely known or understood, which made him popping up in Menace to Society all the more random. Like what? Like, ain't that Saafir?
I wonder if the Source reviewed it. Anyone know?
They did. Yeah, they did. They reviewed, I don't know how many mics it got, but they reviewed it because, again, any mention of the Bay Area rap scene that we were into, we were so affirmed just to see. So it did, but I think it didn't get 4.
Right.
Yeah, it was probably like a 3, 2.5. Or something. Yeah. Outside of college radio and like access television, I don't think this got a whole lot of play, because I don't ever remember seeing this on like Rap City, for instance.
Nope.
And Rap City would show all kind of stuff.
I'm curious, how did you two hear about it, Zach and Chief?
Yeah, it's a good question. I never thought about that, the exposure. But I was talking to a friend of mine from Michigan, deep into hip hop and especially underground weird stuff, and he didn't know about the album. And then when he brought that up, it made me think, like, I don't really remember it being a thing in Detroit necessarily, or getting played at shows, before shows or something. So I think I must have saw it in the source. Like, I know for sure I remember reading something about Worship the D, reading like the backstory. It must have been a Saafir interview or something. I can still kind of see the graphics in my head, so that had to be how I heard about it. And then it was at least distributed enough that I could get it, out in the sticks, an hour from Detroit. So I picked it up and fell in love with it. But I think, yeah, it wasn't a big Midwestern album, I wouldn't say.
Yeah, I heard this on a KVRX in Austin. There was a Wednesday night hip hop show called House of Fat Beats, and I think I had heard some of the freestyle stuff that he did at that point, and I had heard Battle Drill. That's what they used to play on there a lot. Light Sleeper, though, I first heard of him on Access Television down in Austin on this, damn, I can't even remember what that show was, but they would show like all the underground videos and all like the R-rated videos and stuff. And this popped up on there one time in the hip hop block. And then the name started popping up more. I think 4080 might be a Oakland based or West Coast based magazine, and he used to be in there.
Yeah, before we move on, I want to point out two iconic lines that I think that he's known for that kind of define his characters. From Light Sleeper, people think I'm talking to myself when I'm rehearsing on the rhyme. And then we missed back when we heard bullshit, schizophrenic tenant number one. You know, I think those are the two that kind of stand out clearly. And I think it sums up his kind of sensibility is like, um, you know, he talks about exorcisms a lot, like possession, and then there's like schizophrenic sensibilities. So there's this kind of internal battle, I think, that's also happening. And yeah, I mean, I think those are the lines that people kind of he distinguished himself with.
Both of those lines, too, also kind of present him as being looked at by others as an outsider, a weirdo, like
crazy.
The tenant that's people think is schizophrenic, or, you know, the guy that people think is talking to himself, you know, like seems like very aware of being different, being seen as different.
Absolutely.
Man, I was gonna start pulling lyrics out, but he's got way too many lyrics, and I would have just highlighted everything. But this does have one line that I've always loved by him, where he's so what does it mean when I reach maturity and still see that I'm not the mayor of my mayonnaise, the master of my loo? It's like, what the fuck are you even talking about? But I always love the way that he flipped that.
The master.
Yeah, I wanted to bring
loo.
that one up too. I didn't know that he was saying mayor of mayonnaise until I looked at the notes today.
Yeah.
I was like, damn, that's like, how he can pull it off though. I mean, that's something else.
Yeah, that line came completely out of left field in that song, and it's always stuck in my head.
All right, so we're going to get into one of the many little skits and interludes on this album. This Big Nose.
I got some rhymes. I already hear these lyrics in high man. They try it.
Yeah. Well, won't you?
You know, it's like.
Wait. Come on, man. We about to bounce, man.
Oh, man. It's like, okay.
Oh, just come through. Why don't you come through?
Okay, let's see what we know about it. Come pick me up around 7.
Oh, well
7, 5 at least.
We'll just be outside, nigga.
Even it's raining outside, but now.
We'll go perfect, man.
So silly. Yeah, this just cracks me up, and
Like, what?
yeah, I don't know. I just thought this made me think about not only on this album, all the interludes and the kind of atmosphere that it brings the album, and the really like beautiful way that it introduces all of the Hobo Junction to an audience for the first time, but also just thinking about the history of interludes and skits and stuff, and like thinking about how, you know, who might have influenced this. Of course, you know, Prince Paul is the, you know, established like progenitor of rap skits, but it got me thinking too about like more like atmospheric, like casual conversation type of skits. That like, to me, like the first really impactful one that I think may have been a little bit of an influence on this album was in America's Most Wanted, Ice Cube, that like, you know, JD's Gafflin.
Yep.
That I feel like that may have been a little influence here.
Yep.
I feel like you gotta throw Quentin's On His Way from Far Side in there too. It's got some of that energy. Especially with the whole phone call element. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, the phone call voice is what kills me in this. Because at first Like it always reminds me of Charlie Brown, like the adults in Charlie Brown. And then I realized that they're just doing it like with their mouth. They're not even on the phone. They're just like doing something like this, and it's so stupid. Like wonderfully dumb. It's great.
Yeah, I thought it was like a reverse prank call. Like the person that you call has a funny voice instead of you calling up somebody with a funny voice.
And just doesn't appear to have a direction or a plot. JD's Gafflin is like, there's something you're going to, because Ice Cube is a movie guy essentially, so he's setting up a scene for you. These skits on here don't necessarily go anywhere. They're just these guys kind of goofing off. To the Far Side example, I think is a great corollary there. But I feel bad for Big Nose. Big Nose is dope. This was his introduction, and like the track is like what 3 minutes, and 2.5 is this weird skit, and he gets like 16 bars, and that's it. So I was really now listening to it back, I'm like, man, if I was Big Nose, I'd be mad. He put some bars on that.
Yeah, did anyone follow Big Nose's career? Did he do much stuff after this?
There's a bunch of Hobo Junction, if I was a better archivalist, there were a bunch of Hobo Junction tapes. So Big Nose, Rationale, Jay-Z, producer, not Jay-Z, Jay-Z. They had a bunch of stuff out in the underground, and like that was a way to be like, I'm a real head. Like I have the Rationale, the Big Nose tapes. Essentially too ahead of their time. Their stuff was so weird. Big Nose's voice, this kind of like sounds like his nose is stuffed, and also he has a slight lisp or something. Like it was just so out there. Even maybe more so than Saafir, and I would say Rational too. That you really had to be into it. But as far as I know, there wasn't much after the mid-90s. The only Hobo Junction group that really caught any traction beyond this album was the Who Riders.
Who Riders?
Yeah, who did get a deal with Warner Brothers at the same time that Saafir had one. And they were really big for like 18 months. But like for 18 months, like they were coming to San Jose doing shows frequently. It was a big deal for a little while. But they were the only ones out of that camp that seemed to get traction outside of this album.
Yeah,
Demone. Go ahead, Joe.
Well, I was just thinking we should maybe do a whole episode of like interludes at some point. Rap interludes.
Skit hop, as Nate says.
What? Skit hop, yeah.
Skit hop.
yeah, because y'all didn't know the Fugees one, the 4 chicken wings fried hard and shit. And I feel like that's a classic interlude right there. I feel like everybody knows that Fugees one. But yeah.
I only listened to that album once.
Fair enough. Demone, you brought up a point about some of Hobo Junction and them being ahead of their time. And that's something that I was kind of thinking about Saafir in general today, just listening to this stuff. Like, because the only other cat I could think of that might even been considered ahead of their time would be like an Old Dirty or a RZA. But then they were so like defining, like they almost pulled the time to them. And they're like, this is what's happening now.
Well, they're from New York. So weirdos from New York. They have a built-in advantage. Not to get provincial here, but
no, that's true.
If you're from the Mecca, then your weirdness becomes defining. And I have a little bit of chip on my shoulder because Old Dirty Bastard is one of the greatest of all time, but so is E40. And we spent 25 years people acting like, especially in New York, that E40 was not good. And I'm like, well, if he was from there, then it would be a different story. So I feel like Saafir, in a way, definitely was ahead of his time, but also from too small of a market for that really to have a lot of traction. Although, and I mean this, I know this is not the goal of this episode, he did have a very interesting run. Menace to Society. He gets the Warner Brothers deal. He does the Mr. No-No record. He does the Golden State Warriors stuff. Like he was kind of on the cusp, but the industry at that time could never really find a way to to market him. But even as weird as the rap industry was, folks could see he had something.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's the thing.
I 100% agree. And I was just wondering, like, would there have been an era that if he popped up, say, 2015 or something, when like kind of trap beats were just kind of coming on the scene, but he's still doing this sort of off kilter, but also gangster thing, would he like fallen in like is like a nice sort of yang to like a Nipsey Hussle yin or something like that? This is, I can't really think of any other MC that it's like, damn, like he had the potential but didn't work then, but could he work anywhere, like ultimately.
Weird shit is cooler now. So I do think that, I was listening to, I don't know if you guys have peeped the Bruiser Wolf stuff yet, but I'm like, oh, this is weird. Oh, okay. This is, and I think there's just more acceptance for more different types of flows and pockets and things. And I think, he probably would have more of a traction in I don't know. I think everything kind of post when Lil Wayne started being kind of weird, I think it really just opened the door for like, okay, you can be street and weird. But in that way, Saafir was definitely a trailblazer for that aesthetic.
I would blame a little bit of his career trajectory on the fact that after this album, he changed his style quite a bit to become more normal in a lot of senses. And I feel like a lot of the fans that he did garner with this album were kind of let down by his subsequent releases. So, he was kind of failing people on both ends. Not to speak too ill of the man. We're here to celebrate.
Yeah,
him,
but the mid 90s did that. Rascast, same thing, right? Like in the process of trying to blow up, some of these cats just really alienated their core fan bases. But and we talked when Rascast was on Dad by Rap Pod, we talked about that a little bit. And he kind of mentioned some of the pressures of, you get the major label deal and, they want hits and they want things like that. So I think that's a valid point. I know a lot of folks were disillusioned by the direction that he eventually went in, which, that's unfortunate.
But yeah, I was also thinking about the New York thing earlier this week and how important that city is for a groundbreaking crew to go bigger, because I was just thinking about it in the context of Company Flow and even Def Jux. Like, I think they would have had maybe a whole different kind of rap career if they had been in Florida or something instead.
True that.
All right, let's get into the next track, No Return, Going Crazy.
Don't you stare at me, don't glare at me, what do I see? We have the exhibit of pain, the unwrapping of pain, rugs with blood stains, neckties and fangs, eyes, brains I'm covering, rolls like foes, drink the flows, I'm telegraphing this punch, the hunchback of Oakland, unloading on the spoken unconventional, the stench of the flow arouses the nostrils of the hostile.
Yeah, to me, this one had a similar sensibility to Bent, kind of this like weird gothic, literary, abstract, poetic sensibility. He's got lines like blurred touching. It's like amazing. And the whole like first verse is about him, like this she devil that's being deceptive and cheating. There's temptation, betrayal. And again, it's kind of this fragmented yet vivid narrative. And I think the whole song to me was about this. It's expressing a battle with unconventional thought and like him being tempted or trying to get wrangled into conformity. And I think like there's in the second verse, Out of me comes confusion, my mind with images, voices from my education said to me he must be killed. I feel mazes concocting. They're not going to feel me, cock blocking, jumping off a bridge, it's like this struggling with like forces trying to put him in check, and he's trying to kind of fend them off. And then it kind of gets summed up by beyond the mountains of man's limitation comes the unhygienic schizophrenic. So he's like, he's declaring it at the end, he's here to stay, and he's coming beyond our limitations. So that's how I read the track, and I'm really glad we did this episode because I was a huge fan of this album, huge fan of his style. But getting a little bit more intimate with the lyrics, I was even more impressed by just so much was going on. And then, this kind of just uncanny ability to pair just like two words together and open up a whole world of possibility and meaning, like the blurred touching, the spirit of pity whispered. Yes, this stuff is just top notch. I mean, that can't really get any better than this. So I'm glad I dug deeper into the lyrics. I mean, it's classic for sure.
That's a great assessment. And who else could you quote as a rapper with just two words? Blurred touching.
Right.
Like, that's a bar.
Pity whispered. That's amazing.
I always get hung up on that chorus sample too. I finally had to look it up, and it's from The Wiz. It's Diana Ross from The Wiz, and like one of the kind of slower interludes.
I also like all the scratching, this kind of like textury, scritchy scratching, kind of offbeat. It runs a lot throughout the album, I think.
I never even thought about it, but like J. Rue the Damager could have like got down on some of this production too. I think he would have sounded pretty dope on some of this production off this album as well.
That's a good point. It makes me wonder, was that intentional? Because what the Sunrises in the East is that 94 as well? Not great with dates, but that would probably be the corollary. But back to the point of when you're from New York and you're offbeat and weird, then there's just a bigger lane for you, because in hip hop lore, J. Rue occupies a different place, right? That's a great corollary, because I think he would have sounded dope on these too.
That's funny. Yeah, they are. Both these albums were in '94 as well. I didn't even put that together, because I just think The Chronic just wiped so much off the map, man. Like gangster rap, at least, being in Texas, and you only get so much, if you're not out there like seeking it.
Right.
Just a whole bunch of diversity, especially out the West Coast, just disappeared.
Thanks, Dr. Dre. All right. So I wanted to play a little bit of this next track. I'm just going to play a little bit because, this is a track I normally would skip on the album, but I thought it could be worth some conversation. Worship the D.
I'm like a HK double M caliber when I'm in the gym, stabbing up guts like a butcher. Put you in a trance, watch me hump you. I got muscles in my ass, so I hump fast at last. The eyes meet mine. Within her abyss, I see concepts for the rhyme. Dimes will be dropped definitely.
So yeah, I mean, it's got some great lines, of course. Like, it's Saafir, so there's some really weird stuff like within her abyss, I see concepts for the rhyme, but this just got me thinking about like the whole, kind of subgenre of XXX rap, graphic sex rap, that for me, like, I remember being a kid, like 11, 12 years old, hearing Two Live Crew and Eazy-E and being like, this is amazing. This is, my parents would hate this. This is shocking. I love it, But it kind of wore off on me pretty quickly, to the point where now I don't want to hear like this, like, graphic rap erotica stuff. But
Muscles in Saafir's ass. That's not. That's not. I listened to this and I was like, "Yep, this is the '90s." There you go.
and I don't want to knock anyone who does, but I'm curious. Like, is there a big audience of like adults that like listening to this stuff, or is this just like
This stuff.
Like I see the attraction to wanting to write it less than I see the attraction to wanting to listen to it. Cause like I remember being like 14, 13, long before I'd had my first kiss, writing my sex raps pattern after Two Live Crew, you know, like it's fun, but to listen to it, I don't know.
Yeah, it seems to have a very specific target audience. It's like a commercial for his services, you know. So, like, it's weird to think of like a kid, like a little boy, sitting around listening to this. Like, yeah, this is the jam. But Saafir and like Hyro and all, especially Souls, they always used to like when they would battle. It would eventually come back around to that too, about like how many girls they pull and whose girl specifically they're pulling and stuff. So it just kind of seems like it was built into the DNA of that style a little bit to be like, I'm dope, and by the way, I'm like pulling all these girls too, you know. Maybe I'm reading too much into it, but
No, I think it's a good point. He's also down with Digital Underground, which is known for that. So I think it was just part of the crew that he rolls with.
But as far as
that was a trope though, right? Like everybody if you didn't have a girl song, you had the weird sex song. And I cringe because it's like the Beat Nuts or something, right? Like on those albums, Common had one too. It made me think of Common's weird sex songs on Can I Borrow a Dollar? And it was a thing. It was kind of like you do, 8/10 battle rap, and then you had to have one sex song. And this was Saafir's.
it's like the sex, drugs, and rock and roll thing, I guess, but the rap version, you know.
See, I was gonna ask you, Bev, because I know that you're you have more of an affinity to horrorcore than I do, I think. And I just was kind of trying to draw a parallel between like shocking sex rap and violent horrorcore. Like they both have the shock value, obviously, and this kind of sleazy undertone. So I was wondering if maybe you also had an extra affinity for this stuff.
The sex magic raps. Yeah. No, I mean, yeah, it's a great point that you bring up. I mean, I think it sets a different tone, and I don't know, like the horrorcore stuff. I think it's just it's something to me to ride to late at night, and it just it puts you in a weird mood. You know, it's it also is kind of bizarre, go on long walks at night and just have that evil shit in your headphones. And I don't know, to me it's about conjuring up a mood, and the sex raps are not something that I usually put on in rotation. It doesn't give me I always was annoyed by this, especially the interludes, like the Biggie one when he's and it's just come on. I really don't know who would want to listen to that, actually. I mean, did anybody not fast forward through that stuff? The Dr. Dre had one too, The Doctor's Office. But I mean, I would say I think, what is it? The Cool Keith album. I bumped that a lot.
Sex Styles.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's a good example of a standout tape in that genre.
Yeah, that one, it's the surreality of it and the humor that's mixed in
funny,
with it.
Right?
Yeah. And it really commits to this trench coat wearing sleazeball character at the phone booth with the lollipop in his mouth. I mean, it's all there. Where people were saying earlier, it was it was to everybody else, it was a little non-committal. It was just something you had to have. But I mean, I do appreciate that he does the kind of Aleister Crowley sex magic take on it. I mean, that's, I think, a little more unique than your average bragging about penis size and so on that usually happens.
So the other thing this got me thinking about is something I've never heard anyone talk about, and this may be a little TMI, but I don't care. When I was little, you know, growing up in the 90s, we didn't have the internet, you know. There was no easy access to porn, and I'm not saying I would turn on these sex raps for my porn, but there were some rap tapes that were pretty were a turn on to me. Like, I'm talking about De La Orgy. I'm talking about a BWP song called "The Pussy's Still Good." Is the pussy still good? And I think it was a Bone Thugs song, maybe "For the Love of Money." But these were porn for me as a little boy. And you know, but basically because they had women moaning in reps. So
I forgot all about that "For the Love of Money" instrumental at the end of the first Bone Thugs, where it's just the chick moaning for like 4 straight minutes, basically.
Yeah. I mean, I have to think I'm not alone in this. I know I've never heard anyone else talk about it, but you know.
No, you're bringing up a great point. I personally have been always super. It makes me bashful, and that's not to see my fair share of porn. Don't get me wrong. But when I hear it on the track, like even like Freaks of the Industry and all that, like it makes me like, I feel weird. I'm always like looking over my shoulder, like, can anyone hear this? There's something about the audio of it that seems like really salacious, and so that's so interesting that you know. But you're right, pre-internet.
You don't watch porn in mixed company. You don't listen to this rap erotica around other people.
Exactly.
Yeah, and I mean it's also more intimate than like, you know, somebody like the Dr. Dre stuff, and like also just like in the Saafir song, him describing the sex act. It's like this is more closer. It's not removed. You know, you're hearing the woman moan, so there's not a mediation through a verbal description, and it's like pre-AMSR, or what is the ASMR or whatever, you know? Like the Bone Thugs were on that tip years before it became an internet sensation.
All right. Well, we're going to get into a little excerpt from the documentary called The Battle, which is about a 25-minute long documentary, I think, on the Saafir casual beef, and which turned into a battle on KMEL, infamously. The documentary directed by Shamari Smith. And Chief, you wanted to hear this certain segment here, so we're gonna get into it.
Fool came to my house. When I come to the front door, I look through the door, it's Saafir at my motherfucking front door with one of his partners sitting by the car. I go grab my little 380. I just had a little 380 at the time. It wasn't nothing. Man, we got down to the talking all the way to the, I was like, yeah, bro, because you know, I said, he was like, oh, you remember? And that's why when we was, I was like, yeah, cops off plea for like 300 or something like that. So when we was rhyming, if you listen back to the battle, he was like, stupid, you don't buy no 380 for 300 or whatever. So I was like, oh, he originated the personals. They call those personals in battles now.
You don't spend 300 on a 380, stupid ass nigga. You not fat, you don't belong with a cat, you belong with a Mac. Join our crew, we'll call you fat cock. You can bring me my Jock Drones mascot. Hey, you don't know, where's my lunch? I'm having a sucker for supper, suckling sap tap water flower. I'm Evian like Evian. Tell Tajay to get out your ear. Nigga, come jump on my dick, my name is Saafir. Come bring me my nameplate. Nigga, your game is fake. You a mark, you put your shit down on stage. Nigga, I seen shit dripping out that little booty. It's defected in that section. Hey, come fuck with me. Come fuck.
Man. Yeah, I love in battles where like it's cordial and people are like just kind of tossing stuff back and forth. And then one person they take it that one level higher, you know, and like this was the moment where it went from like, who's the better rapper to like, okay, now I gotta like just completely show out and like demoralize these cats here, you know. Yeah, I love how like he started calling in other members of Souls and they started jumping in after this point. But This one right here, I had always kind of leaned towards casual in this battle back in the day when I was like a freestyle purist, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
But as I've gotten older and like really listening to what he was doing with the rhyme in here, like Jesus, like Saafir is vicious.
I mean, personally, I just feel like, okay, this is, of course, the West Coast definition of freestyle, which means purely improv, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like it's a cardinal sin to bring pre-written raps to your freestyle battle. And Saafir, you know, plainly admits that he wrote part of his freestyle. So for me, that just like disqualifies him. I don't know.
What's funny too is the part that he says he actually wrote, from what I've heard in interviews, was that little part about Tajay, where he called out Tajay and started talking to him. But he says the rest of it is mostly freestyle.
And he's definitely blending both freestyle and writtens to hilarious effect. I mean, you know, and I definitely would have considered myself a freestyle purist at the time too. But I feel like when we're tossing back and forth insults, and you come with with ones in the chamber ready for the roasting, I think Saafir got the best of them there, and I think Hyro would have done a lot better had they just prepped a little bit. I always felt, even as a kid, not a kid, I was a teenager, but I always felt like Hyro didn't bring their best because they leaned a little too much into the purist notion of, I will just show up on the radio and do this. And Saafir kind of outclassed them in that moment. And if I could, I don't know if y'all heard me tell this one on Dad by Rap Pod. This battle that happened came a week after Saafir and Casual battled at the AC Alone show at what was then the American Music Hall, which I was there. Some friends of mine were performing. They were opening for AC Alone. Epic evening, but there as well, Saafir had another set of like written freestyle stuff that they talk about in the documentary. But the highlight being is when Saafir steals Casual's wallet in the middle of the battle, and then on bar hands it back to him. So Saafir was like really just a showman, and like I think that's why he got the best of Hyro, even though he was just a guy. Like Hobo Junction didn't really provide much support in that battle. It was very interesting, but just epic. It was one of those things like in the movie when it's the 40s and they're all like around the radio listening to Joe Louis in a boxing match. That's how it was. Like everybody's like, "Are you listening to Carry On?" Oh my God, we're like all around the radio, everybody taping. Just such an epic thing. And I think one of the reasons why Saafir's legend continues to this day is that battle, which I don't know how they got that off, man. It wasn't edited either. Like the night of it, like they were cursing and carrying on and almost shooting up Camiel, and epic evening.
That's a great story.
Yeah, that became like instant hip hop history. We were hearing about that even down in Texas through like the college radio stuff, and people were playing like bootleg cassettes they taped off the radio or like portions of the battle and stuff.
All right. Next up, we got Exhibit featuring Saafir and Rascass, Plastic Surgery.
I like to ask some jack for their finances. Need a facial, I'll change your skin tone to interracial. After I'm done, you might have a little pouch though. Nothing my scalpel can't fix. What kind of face you want? I want the kind that make me look like I can rhyme. It'll cost you. But I can find the Skrilla if I can have that nigga face named Saafir. That's imposterous. Plus I never cloned a microphone. What type of shit you want? Hope you got insurance before I sit you on my gurney and weave you to an anesthetic breather. If you're not broke, I'll shape your face like dope and make you right. Cause being fake ain't tight. You need plastic surgery.
It's a strange concept.
Yeah, this beat. Jesus Christ, I love this beat, man. I've always loved that bass line and the drums on this beat.
Yeah, the bass line's awesome.
Is that E Swift?
I don't remember. I gotta look it. I can look it up here in a second. But Yeah, I just picked this one because this and the Street Fighter track come with it. Like, just showed me how well specifically Saafir and Rascast work together. I love like how those two sound together, and I wish it would have worked out with a mod. Exhibit's still a cool addition to that, and fits in with Saafir and the hardness. But yeah, like the plastic surgery thing is a real interesting take on basically calling MCs fake. It's like, well, if you're going to be fake and you're going to manufacture your style and your image here, let me help sculpt this on you permanently. It's like the antithesis to Digital Underground and No Nose Job. No Nose Job is like, I'm never going to be like fake. I'm just going to do what I want to do. And plastic surgery is like, this is the only way you're going to make it. So let's just make you commit to this.
I love the line because, yeah, it's like a basic concept. Like you need reconstructive surgery to be better, basically. But then they just get kind of weird and surreal within that concept. And like, I think Saafir says, I might leave you with a little pouch, like he's going to give you like a kangaroo pouch or something. And then I think it's Rascast later is talking about, I'll separate the conjoined twins of your balls or something and graft them onto your face.
Yeah, I thought, like all these guys kind of have that tough guy voice, and they're all kind of like pretty macho and like built physiques. And I thought that was like, and like these lines that you're quoting, it kind of has this mad scientist vibe. And then also the idea of plastic surgery is like very technical and precise, and I think like to me that was just kind of a funny pairing. Like you would think with all of the testosterone in this lineup, it would be much more aggressive, but then it's these really bizarre scientific experiments of like skin grafting is the form of torture that's happening.
Is that Saafir doing the voice at the very beginning too?
Seems like it. Doctor.
Yeah. You need help, doctor. Yeah, it was E Swift on that beat too.
Interesting. Does this predate Dr. Octagon?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know.
Did he use a similar bass line or the same bass line?
No, I mean just this kind of that whole motif of the mad scientist, malpractice doctor. I've never thought about this. I actually had not heard this track in like literally 20 years or whatever. So it was cool to kind of hear it and vibe with it again.
Yeah, I feel like this album came out before that, but I don't remember. The Speed of Thought or something?
Speed of Life.
Speed of Life.
I cannot find a year on this to save my life, man.
1996.
All right, well, we're winding down to our final track. This is Ballpoint off of the Boxcar Sessions demos.
On tour, need to know everything in order to stay pure. Promo, more visual, utilize exposure, unjoint structure for ballers calling ballpoint. North for the winner, my airspace tastes like frog. Legs connected at the hip for hop smog delays. My display of lungs without sand is hippopotamus. Day one monk of many nights. Robbed of isolation, I'm on that cloud. 9 with a clip boarded up with patches where light fails is where you'll find me first. This railroad engineer poised with the passion of a Beethoven symphony of goblins peeling back the organic. Just think of it.
Yeah, this is one that I transcribed the lyrics because I was kind of taken with some of these lines. He says, "I'm north for the winter. My airspace tastes like frog. Legs connected at the hip for hip smog delays. My display of lungs without sand is hippopotamus, day one monk of many." I don't understand any of that.
I'm like a mansion with no exits.
Yeah, that was a dope line. This track was nuts. I'd never heard of this track at all. And I wish there would have been a complete version of this somewhere along the line back in the day, because that beat hit in the way that he was just jumping around even more so than normal lyrically was really catching me. It was really arresting, you know?
Yeah, especially that last verse. I mean, it's insane. And I was curious about the hook on this, like the ballpoint pen, like significance of that, and then this like posters, glossy dates on tour, need to know everything in order to stay pure. And then like the second time it comes around, he says it in a kind of weird voice, like I don't know if it's sarcastic, um, like if it's again this like need to like now I got to do everything. I have to stay up on the business side and the admin side of this on top of being an MC. Um, it's not really ever addressed in the it's not a complete thought. The hook I think is very different than the verses. So yeah, I was definitely curious about that. Um, and I think there's this, a mixture, like this weird concoction of like Eastern philosophy. There's like exorcisms, birth, bloodbath, bullets, isolation, another mention of a mission, darkness and light. So there's like all of this is kind of like in his orbit. And then this line, selected attempt by the whip to make simplification of the human character. And I think again that goes back to like him having the struggle of like trying to be contained. And like Jonah, I think, pointed out of like the self-reflexive awareness of like being the outsider, being the weirdo, and him kind of battling with that. But yeah, I think definitely overlooked track, and props to Dope Folks for putting this out properly. It's a great one.
Yeah, the whole demo is pretty good, I think.
Man, I wish he got more props, especially like nowadays, just for being so adventurous with the rhyme scheme. Like he was 100% one of the first people I heard where I realized I didn't just have to like rhyme on the 2, rhyme on the 4. It was like I could be a little braver with the way that I put my rhymes together. So for maybe just that alone, and then even a little bit for his combination of like the vocal timbre along with the vocabulary and the way he put those rhymes together. He just seems super criminally slept on to me.
Agreed.
Yeah, I would add to that, if you don't have Boxcar Sessions or you disregarded it, pick it up. If you've been a fan, like I was, return to it with a deeper look, because it's definitely rewarding.
Yeah, absolutely. I think Saafir is one of those artists who definitely deserves to be looked at deeper, which rap fans are not great about, like going back and examining stuff from previous eras. But I think he made some real contributions and is a super unique voice. And I just want to thank y'all for giving me the opportunity to kind of dig deep back into this again. As 1/3 of the Dad Bod Rap Pod, my other 2 comrades not super into this album. So my pitch to do a retro episode on this was vetoed very quickly. So I appreciate the opportunity to talk about this a little bit more.
Yeah, our pleasure. Thanks a lot for being here. Hey, we got a contest. We got another contest this week to win. Speaking of Oakland, this is a very rare underground rap tape from Oakland. Derek D. Going Public. Yeah, I'd never heard of this or heard it before until I found it in some thrift store some years ago, but it's very rare. No one else has this. It has this inside little inscription part, which I love too. It says PS Mafia, in parentheses, define, : don't be misled by the usage of the word. It's just signifying my organized lyrical torchy hard beats and dedicated members which cannot be stopped! Exclamation point. Stopped! Exclamation point. Stopped! Exclamation point. Stopped! Exclamation point. So I love that. You'll also win this Too Short trading card.
Oh.
And a Weird Rap sticker.
Baby.
The contest, which Zach came up with, is can you name 4 other rappers who have nose jewelry? Listed in the YouTube comments. First one to answer correctly wins the prize. And oh yeah, and the other prize you win is an honorary membership to the Weird Rap Discussion Gang for a month, which means you can join these talks via text and interact with us. That's a $5 value. People normally have to go to patreon.com/weirdrap and pay $5 per month to do that same thing. In addition to that, they get our after hours discussions, which we'll be having shortly, and other stuff like the monthly Weird Rap podcast bonus episode, etc. So thank you everyone for being here.
Zach, Chief, Jonah, it's been real, guys. Appreciate y'all.
All right.
Thank you for being here.
Peace. Oh, this is weird. Oh, okay.